Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share Wendigo encounter horror stories. First story, Wendigo. I love the woods. I love mountains. Being able to live so close to nature is a privilege I've never taken for granted. But recently, something strange happened out there that I'd like to share. I was heading down a path in the woods, not far from my home. It had been snowing heavily for the past couple weeks and was finally starting to calm down. In the distance, I noticed what appeared to be a man leaning against a log, far from the trail. He was still. I feared maybe he'd been stuck out here and frozen in that spot. It's all too common out here when the snowfall is heavy. I made my way over to him. As I got close, I could see his ears and fingers were frostbitten. His clothes were dirty and disheveled. His mouth was covered in dry blood. When I was only a few steps from him, his head began to move, slowly turning and looking at me with dead, glazed-over eyes. His expression was vacant until he looked at me with surprise and a crazed sort of fear. He tried to stumble to his feet, but instead ended up flailing into the deep snow. I talked softly and slowly. "Do you need help? How long have you been out here?" The man wouldn't, or perhaps couldn't, speak. However, nearby was a small hiking backpack with a tag on it that listed an address. I knew where the address was, just a few miles from my home. He must be a neighbor. I tried asking him if that was where he lived. He just kept looking at me with that crazed, fear-drenched stare, but eventually he was able to nod in affirmation. I had no way of contacting anyone, so I figured my best option would be to take him myself. Who knew how much longer he'd last out there if I left to get help? I picked him up to stand on his feet, and he was remarkably light. He leaned on my shoulder at first, but after walking for a short time, he walked almost entirely on his own. He began to say things as if he was talking to himself, a low, dry, gurgling sort of speech. It felt very inhuman. He must be delusional, I thought. I tried to get him to talk to me. "How long have you been out here?" "Weeks." His voice was like gravel. "I'm taking you home. Is there someone that can help you?" "My wife." "You were out here all alone?" He stopped talking. After a short time, he stopped walking and fell to his knees. He began to weep, and I tried to stand him up again. He latched onto me and whispered closely, I had to eat. That explained the dried blood on his mouth. When you're in a life or death situation, you have to make hard decisions. I stopped talking after that. It took us a while of trudging to make it to his home. As we approached the front door, it swung open and out ran a woman whom I assumed was his wife. "Oh my God, honey, is that you?" She shouted as she ran up and grabbed him, all but ignoring me. She hurried him inside, saying she'd call for a doctor, leaving me in the cold. That's fine. It's probably a lot to take in. To have her husband disappear for weeks and show up out of the blue like that. I had to get home to my wife anyway. She's probably wondering where I was. On my way home, I was going over everything that had happened. What if I hadn't found him? Will he tell his wife what happened? Where's the other person that was with him? Next thing I remember, I was doubling over in pain. It came from the bottom of my stomach. Oh no, I thought. I could have just infected myself with something he had. I blacked out and woke up at home in bed. No idea how I got there. An hour or so went by. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling a pit in my stomach. The pain was immense. It was almost like a severe hunger. I thought for sure I had contracted something from the man I helped earlier. Some airborne illness. When the doctor came, he approached my bedside with caution. He had almost no professional candor. His eyes widened as he looked at me with a certain fear. He only did a few tests and left me to be quarantined in my room alone. I could hear him speaking to my wife in the kitchen. When he goes, I couldn't make out much of the conversation. Seemed like bad news. After the doctor left, my pain only got worse. It was more distinctive hunger, however. I was becoming delirious. I couldn't remember the last time I ate. I have eaten before, haven't I? My wife came to me asking what I needed. My only answer was meat. It's been a week now since I got sick. I've lost so much weight. I'm a ghost of my former self, but I eat constantly. Venison and beef most commonly. My hunger is so strong I'll eat them raw. While I was at my weakest, my wife fed me, and I almost bit her fingers off a few times. Not that I mean to. I'm just starving. She's opted to start sliding food under my door. She says I'm not the same anymore. I know that much. The dog went missing, and only I know why. Third story. How my father survived an encounter with a Wendigo. All know the feeling of hunger, and yet some have never seen it. You yourself may have claimed to be starving, empty, famished, or hungry. But have you yourself ever encountered the merciless beast we call hunger? Have you ever considered that the thing you call starving is only the fingernail of the monster that plagues the minds and souls of the innocent and sane? Breathing down your neck and clawing your skin with blood-covered nails, desperate to get inside, only blocked from you gobbling down cheeseburgers, pizza, donuts, fruits, and veggies. And yet some have come close to hunger. Some of the worst instances of mass hunger, known as famines, have plagued us for centuries. Ireland 1845, Russia 1921, China 1959. And yet even in these stages of hunger, when people's teeth were gnawed and broken from eating leather and dirt, and animals had a feast of the bones and rotten flesh of human remains, very few have ever seen hunger. Few have seen the Wendigo. All the Wendigo ever feels is hunger, for it is hunger. You may have heard of the Wendigo, seen drawings of it, but for the few who have seen it, for most it was the last thing they ever saw. I haven't seen it, no, thank God I haven't seen it, yet the blood that runs in my family have seen it, stared at it in its hollow eyes. This is not my story, this is my father's. When I was around the age of 15, he told me to sit down next to him, pointing to the brown cloth chair. I was old enough to know, he told me, why he never lets me set foot in the woods, why we never go up north, especially never when it's winter. I recorded it all. He requested for that, wanted a record of what happened to him, to make sure no one else went through it like he did. This is what he told me. Father's story. He takes out a cigarette and clicks a lighter until a small blaze, and puts the small flame to his cigarette, taking a puff before starting. My uncle decided it was time for me to visit the Great Lakes forests, told me the woods were some of the most beautiful in the whole country. It took a lot of convincing until your grandfather decided it was fine for me to visit the north. Of course, when he made the decision, it was winter by then. The winter down here is a light breeze compared to the freeze up in the north. Cold days and dark icy nights. It's a wonder how the Native Americans managed to survive months of thick snow and the creatures that came with it. He pauses to take another puff of his cigarette before continuing. This didn't stop my uncle, who had prepared in case we had to go during the winter. He for both me and him, as if we were going to the Arctic, thick puffy jackets, fat boots, and gloves as well as goggles in case we came upon a storm on a walk, as well as bear spray if we came across wild animals. He'll so pack something else, a .50 action Express Desert Eagle, the ones those cops use in the movies. He didn't actually expect to use it. It was just in case we came across a bear or lynx, and things got close and personal. He pauses and stares at his right leg. He definitely didn't think we needed it for something different. It was around mid-November when we took the plane to the state of Michigan. He had purchased a standard hotel room in a small town. He refused to mention its name, and we spent the most few days simply getting used to the sceneries of where we were. My uncle was right. It was beautiful. Actually, I don't even think the word beautiful cuts it. I could see the edge of the forest by my window. They were tall, like long hairs protruding from the head of Mother Nature. And along those hairs lied the fleas. Squirrels, chipmunks, birds, and the occasional wolf and fox would pass by, before despairing in the shadow of the trees. I'll tell you, even now, I do miss seeing the trees, watching the wind blow the tall pines in harmony. He sighs and puts out his cigarette on his wooden chair. But I know I can never go back there. Almost every day we went on hikes, with the snow crunching beneath our feet, stopping every so often to witness the wildlife. Once or twice we came across a bear. I was scared, of course, but my uncle had faced plenty in his time living there, so of course he knew what to do. Don't look them in the eyes, he would whisper to me as he pulled out his bear spray, just in case. And eventually, it would move along, searching for some berries to eat. It was around our second week there when my uncle decided to take me on my first night walk. So we put on our coats, snow boots, and brought along the desert spray and Desert Eagle. It was somehow even more gorgeous in the dark than it was in the day. The stars flowed above us like fireflies, welcoming us to the forest as the moon as big and bright as ever hovered above us. We walked until we came upon a fork in the path. We usually would go left, as it much longer, so we could experience the forest longer, but it was a lot colder than usual, so my uncle decided it was best to get back sooner rather than later. For some reason, the colder weather did hang in my mind for longer than it should have. Although the weather could be unpredictable, the weather news where I was more accurate than the ones down in the north. This thought slept my mind eventually, reasoning that every news channel got it wrong eventually. So we continued, but as we went, it just kept getting colder and colder. By this point, my uncle repeatedly kept looking up at the sky, with a bewildered look on his face. Looking up, I saw not a single cloud in the sky, nothing to indicate a snowstorm was coming or anything that would cause the weather to get this cold. Soon my uncle put me close to him to make us warmer. It wasn't a long hike back, just a mile or more. Then it was clear something was wrong, more than the weather. As we kept walking, we stepped fast steps. My uncle jerked his head in that direction, instinctively pulling out his bear spray. Looking past him, I could clearly see several pairs of eyes in the shadow of the trees, moving fast, moving toward us. My uncle had quickly raised the bear spray and put himself in front of me, screaming to get packed. Looking over, I could now clearly see it was a wolf, mouths open, panting and stamping its feet on the ground, creating loud cracks as the snow fell beneath them. Looking up, Uncle had his finger straight on the bear spray trigger, ready to blast them straight in the shouted faces. Then the wolves ran right past us. They were maybe 10 feet away from us at most, moving so fast I could feel a small gust of wind push against my face. My uncle put down the bear spray and looked around dusty, in complete, utter confusion encompassing his whole face. That's when I saw more eyes. He motions his hand in a circle around him. There had to be dozens of critters and birds. Running. They didn't even stop to look at us. They were just running. All the animals I had feared, all the critters and birds, and all sorts of things in the woods I had stared at in amazement just days before. All of them were running. I had never seen anything like it in my life, nor did my uncle. He decided that it was time to go, most likely because whatever the animals were running from was something that we didn't want to come across. Now, my uncle was someone that doesn't get scared easily. From the stories your grandfather told me, he had faced death more times than he could count, coming across an angry grizzly, a hungry pack of wolves, and even someone pointing a gun at him straight in the face. Even then, I didn't see fear in his face, but looking into his eyes, I could see worry, and that was enough I needed to know. Our standard walk had turned into a jog, with Uncle deciding that it would be fast to go off trail through the woods. On the trail, there was a clear opening overhead for the light of the moon and stars to shine through. But off trail, the pine needles blocked most of the light that came through, with small beams piercing the thick hide here and there. My uncle just kept walking straight toward the town. He probably just had half a mile left when he suddenly stopped, making me bump into his back. He didn't move, didn't even make a kind, almost like he had stopped breathing. "Uncle?" I asked in a squally voice. I looked ahead of him, my heart pounding against my sternum as it pumped blood like a bicycle pump. Up ahead was the outline of a person, though it was too far away to see any facial features or any features at all. It was, 30 seconds before my uncle started backing up, gesturing me to do the same. "Hello, can we help you?" I heard a tremble. It was a small one, but it was enough to tell me everything I needed to know. My uncle, one of the coolest people I've ever known, was scared. Slowly, ever so slowly, my uncle put his hand behind his back, moving towards the bear spray. But my eyes nearly popped out when his hand went past the bear spray and moved toward the gun. Crack! Up ahead, I heard what sounded like a small twig break, and breaking eye contact with my uncle's hand, looked forward back at the figure. He had taken a step forward, stepping on a small branch that poked out of the layer of snow. And with that step, there was a new feeling in the air. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't fear. It was hunger. An almost lustful amount of hunger. "Look," my uncle said, as his hand still gradually moved towards the Desert Eagle. "We don't want any trouble. We're just trying to get back to town. So if you could please..." He didn't get to finish his sentence. By this point, my father stopped looking at me, instead looking out the window. It all happened too fast. First, there were the steps, fast, rampant. Each step came with a snarl. It was too fast for my uncle, too fast for me to process. What came next was the gunshot. It rang off the trees, bouncing back into my ears, making them ring like a church bell. He got one shot off before it got to us, one shot off before it made him scream. It slammed into him, flinging both me and his gun to the left, slamming me on the ground with a loud thud which knocked the wind right out of me. Oh God, the screams. It didn't kill him quickly. I didn't see it happen, but I heard the crunch of teeth going through flesh and meeting bone. It probably stopped there for a second to savor the taste of the blood against its rotten teeth before it continued. I'm glad I didn't see it happen, but I could well damn hear it. Splish and splash as blood poured on the ground, as it continued to sink its teeth into his flesh, seemingly hard for it to hold back. It had enough of the taste. Now it wanted to eat. Crunch after crunch came, followed by tearing and popping sounds. I think it was pulling the organs out of his stomach. Don't know how long I had my eyes closed, but I opened them. I was facing away from them and looking at a light that bounced off a silver object. The Desert Eagle. I stood up, still shaken from the fall. The funny thing was I wasn't scared. My brain must have taken a hit, making it difficult for me to process what was happening behind me. I took a casual step forward towards the gun, cracking the show beneath my feet. And that's when the crunching stopped. That's when I remembered where I was. We both turned around at the same time. Its eyes meet mine, and my eyes meet it, if you could call them eyes. I say this because I don't even know if they were eyes. They were black and hollow and black. I say black because all there was in those eyes was black. Then there was the rest of its body. I couldn't believe the thing that did that to my uncle was unbelievably skinny. Its ribs poked out of its chest, bones clearly seen through its slender arms and legs. There were antlers that looked like that of a deer protruding from its head. He pauses and thinks for a moment. No, it wasn't a head. It was his skull, because that's what it looked like, a skull with deer antlers coming from the top of its head. And even as it crouched, I could see it was tall, even towering over me in that stance. We both stared at each other for what felt like hours before it turned back around and continued eating what was left of my uncle. Did it even care that I was there? Why didn't it just attack me next? Just get it over with. I didn't stop to ask these questions. I just turned, picked up the gun, and ran. For a second, I considered taking a shot, but I didn't know if the bullet my uncle shot had hit it. If it did, then I don't even think bullets affected this thing. All I knew was I had to get away. So I kept running and running and running. What probably took just 10 minutes felt like an eternity. And then I saw the lights of the town. I'm going to make it, I thought, hope creeping up my spine and into my brain. And that's when I heard the distant footsteps. I turned around for a split second and felt that hope come crashing down all the way to my toes. There was probably just 1,000 meters away. I could see its eyes. They weren't glowing or anything. They were just so black they stood out even in the darkness. And it was running fast. I couldn't believe my eyes how fast this thing was running. I would bet all the money I have this thing could easily beat a gazelle high on cocaine. I turned my head back around and continued running, putting all my strength and energy into my legs to just get away from this thing. But the steps just kept getting closer and closer. Now today, I understand why it didn't eat me before. Because it knew that no matter how much I tried to run, it would never fail to catch me. And it did. A jolt of pain tore through my entire leg when it clamped its teeth into my leg, the teeth reaching my femur and making a small crack in it. This thing had unimaginable strength to pick me up in its mouth and flung me several dozen feet. I landed head first, shock and pain staring at my head, spreading throughout my entire body. But soon the pain was going away as I felt myself slipping away out of consciousness. In the background, I heard it crunching, savoring the little bit of meat it got out of my leg. This is it. This is how I'm going to die. I believed it. I truly believed it. But then I heard it. Get up. It was my uncle. You aren't going down that easy, are you? The words were all I needed. Every emotion in my body, hopelessness, fear, sadness, despair, were all replaced by one, rage. I turned around and pointed the gun, which I managed to keep a hold of, and pinter it straight at its face. It turned, seemingly shocked that I had a weapon in my hand, but soon after, it charged. I took a casual step forward towards the gun, cracking the show beneath my feet. And that's when the crunching stopped. That's when I remembered where I was. We both turned around at the same time. Its eyes meet mine, and my eyes meet it, if you could call them eyes. I say this because I don't even know if they were eyes. They were black and hollow and black. I say black because all there was in those eyes was black. Then there was the rest of its body. I couldn't believe the thing that did that to my uncle was unbelievably skinny. Its ribs poked out of its chest, bones clearly seen through its slender arms and legs. There were antlers that looked like that of a deer protruding from its head. He pauses and thinks for a moment. No, it wasn't a head. It was his skull, because that's what it looked like, a skull with deer antlers coming from the top of its head. And even as it crouched, I could see it was tall, even towering over me in that stance. We both stared at each other for what felt like hours before it turned back around and continued eating what was left of my uncle. Did it even care that I was there? Why didn't it just attack me next? Just get it over with. I didn't stop to ask these questions. I just turned, picked up the gun, and ran. For a second, I considered taking a shot, but I didn't know if the bullet my uncle shot had hit it. If it did, then I don't even think bullets affected this thing. All I knew was I had to get away. So I kept running and running and running. What probably took just 10 minutes felt like an eternity. And then I saw the lights of the town. I'm going to make it, I thought, hope creeping up my spine and into my brain. And that's when I heard the distant footsteps. I turned around for a split second and felt that hope come crashing down all the way to my toes. There was probably just 1,000 meters away. I could see its eyes. They weren't glowing or anything. They were just so black they stood out even in the darkness. And it was running fast. I couldn't believe my eyes how fast this thing was running. I would bet all the money I have this thing could easily beat a gazelle high on cocaine. I turned my head back around and continued running, putting all my strength and energy into my legs to just get away from this thing. But the steps just kept getting closer and closer. Now today, I understand why it didn't eat me before. Because it knew that no matter how much I tried to run, it would never fail to catch me. And it did. A jolt of pain tore through my entire leg when it clamped its teeth into my leg, the teeth reaching my femur and making a small crack in it. This thing had unimaginable strength to pick me up in its mouth and flung me several dozen feet. I landed head first, shock and pain staring at my head, spreading throughout my entire body. But soon the pain was going away as I felt myself slipping away out of consciousness. In the background, I heard it crunching, savoring the little bit of meat it got out of my leg. This is it. This is how I'm going to die. I believed it. I truly believed it. But then I heard it. Get up. It was my uncle. You aren't going down that easy, are you? The words were all I needed. Every emotion in my body, hopelessness, fear, sadness, despair, were all replaced by one, rage. I turned around and pointed the gun, which I managed to keep a hold of, and pinter it straight at its face. It turned, seemingly shocked that I had a weapon in my hand, but soon after, it charged. I wasn't aiming for anything, just pulled the trigger, almost seemingly in slow motion. I saw the bullet fly and go straight into the void that was its eyes. Time stopped for just a second. Then it stumbled backward, grabbing its face, and I heard it scream. For the first time in the recording, I saw fear flicker in my father's eyes, and then he continues. When I saw it open its mouth, I expected a monstrous bellow or a loud shriek. But what came out was worse. It wasn't the sound of a monster, but the sound of a people. Hundreds of people, men and women screaming in pain and agony. The elderly shrieked in terror. I could hear babies crying and toddlers screaming as if they were denied a toy. But one scream remains in my mind forever, the only reason I can't ever forget what happened that day. Because I heard a specific scream come out of its mouth. The scream of my uncle. The rage was gone, and the terror returned. I got back up and continued running toward the light. I didn't want to get away from it. I just wanted to get away from the horrible screaming. But I just couldn't. No matter how fast I ran, the dream stayed the same. But then it changed, for it was no longer screaming of pain, but screams of rage. I continued running. I had to get away. I wanted to. I needed to. My femur's crack was continuing to grow as I continued running. My lungs pressed against my rib cage as my body demanded a huge amount of oxygen that the lungs could not provide. I remember bursting through the woods, welcomed by the bright street lamps and the hard pavement beneath my boots. And when I had burst through out of the woods, my body had used up all its strength, and I fell. The last memory I got before blacking out was the screech of tires, a man looking over me on the phone, and before I lost consciousness, I turned my head and turned toward the woods. I saw it, standing there, one eye closed, the other empty, I staring at my own. I didn't need to see its face to know what it felt. It was angry, it hated me, and it was still hungry. I woke up the next day in the town's hospital. By that time, I had been out for 3 days, and your grandfather had flown over after he heard the news. I was greeted with his tears and his warm hug after he saw me awake. I told him and everyone else everything about the thing, about Uncle, everything. They didn't believe me, probably thought the number of hits I took on my head made me reimagine a little old bear as a monster. They did send out a search party, however, didn't find it, but found my uncle. The rumors spread how every bit of flesh, blood, organ, and even the bone marrow was stripped clean, and all that was left was a clutter of bones. He sighs. That Wendigo is probably still out there, continuing to eat innocent people, continuing to hate me for being the one that got away. And there's more out there, more that will not stop until they are full, and they are never full and never will be. He pauses. The most disturbing thought I have is that of my uncle's voice in my head when that Wendigo had me on the ground. Sometimes I think, was it actually my uncle's voice telling me to get up? Or was it that thing telling me to get up, wanting me to put up a little more fight so it could make the kill so much better? Fourth story, Wendigo stories. When I was young, I often spent parts of summers with my grandmother in her home out in the country. It was my favorite place in the world, and I always looked forward to the week-long stays of gardening, baking, late-night fires with esmores and ghost stories, and enjoying having my grandmother all to myself. There was a pond not far from her house where I would sometimes go to swim. It was home to quite a few frogs, and at night they made the most incessant noises. I complained to my grandmother only once, saying I couldn't enjoy the night breeze with all that racket. She took me on her lap and told me a story about an old man and woman who lived near a lake. The old man couldn't stand the singing of the frogs, but his wife told him that they kept the Wendigo away, and to harm them would be unwise. Well, he didn't listen and set about methodically catching all the frogs on the lake. It was a process that took some time, but he did not stop until he had rid the lake of the pesky amphibians. That night, without the protection of the frogs, he and his wife were slaughtered by the Wendigo, a vicious, whip-like demon creature with elongated fingers ending in razor-sharp talons, and rows of silver teeth as thin and keen as needles. I wrote it off as another of her ghost stories, though she seemed more serious than usual about it. I never complained about the frogs again, mostly because I grew to enjoy them and put the story out of my mind. In fact, I'd forgotten all about it until it came up this past spring in a Native American literature class I was taking in college. The mention of the Wendigo sparked that old memory of my grandmother's story. I thought she had made up the word. I didn't realize there were stories about it, originating in Algonquian legends. Eager to connect something from my childhood to the topic, I Googled it, only to find that my grandmother had apparently been mistaken. There was nothing I could find about the story she had told me, nor any references of frogs providing protection from the Wendigo. In fact, the Wendigo of legend seemed very little like my grandmother's version. They were said to be insatiable, craving human flesh, and sometimes created from the forms of people who had resorted to cannibalism to survive. Descriptions varied, but they sounded almost nothing like my grandmother's bogeyman version. I actually chucked as I read it, almost a bit embarrassed by how badly my grandmother had messed up the original tale. I changed residences this summer, moving to a newly built 1,000 square foot on each side duplex on the edge of town. The other side is to be occupied by my landlady, who'd had the place built. However, she isn't scheduled to move the rest of her stuff in and begin living there for a couple of weeks. She's waiting for her lease to end. Even though my new place is only a few minutes from the edge of town, it feels much more isolated. I enjoy the seclusion of my new home and its proximity to a more natural setting. I'm surrounded by woods, and from my patio, I can even see a pond beyond the carefully landscaped lawn, which is meticulously carved out from the surrounding woodlands. Just like the pond near my grandmother's house, the frogs have put up a ferocious racket lately. I prefer not to pay to run my air conditioning if I can help it, so I have every window open to catch a breeze. That means that I can hear them as clearly as if I were standing on the water's edge. It took a few days to get used to the noise, but I'm fine now, just like I was those summers when I was young. In fact, the noise has been comforting to me during the stress of the move. Tonight is different. I find myself standing in my living room, staring at where the pond is, though I can't see it in the dark. The air is eerily still and oppressively warm, but all my windows are shut, and I feel impossibly cold. I'd long since convinced myself that my grandmother's story had been a silly tale, a twisting of an old legend by irreverent storytellers. But for some reason, I have the most overwhelming sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. Leaving my house means braving the darkness beyond my home, but I don't know if I'm going to be safe in here either. The frogs have stopped singing. Sixth story, an encounter with a Wendigo. At 1 minute to midnight, I took out the shot glass and put it beside the bottle of Jägermeister. I don't drink anymore after what happened to Pop. The one exception is the first day of September. The house is dark except for the warm glow of the 3 bulbs above the dining room table. I rub my tongue against the inside of my cheek. My mouth always goes dry. The only sound is the incessant ticking of the wall-mounted clock. At midnight, the soft bell sounds, a miniature version of church bells. I fill the glass and hold it aloft for a second and swallow with a deep breath. The subtle burn winds its way into my throat and stomach. I wash the shot glass by the light of the moon shining through the kitchen window. Loretta wouldn't mind my drinking, but a used shot glass beside the sink raises questions. And I never like to talk about it. All these years later, I still have nightmares. What I saw up on that mountain left a greater impression than any other event in my life. More than my children being born and my father drinking himself into an early grave. Loretta tells me I should talk about it. That would help. She might be right. She always is. So here goes. I joined the park ranger service right out of school, and it was a perfect fit. I took to academics like a fish to the desert, and the outdoors always called. I passed my time in school daydreaming of the weekend and hiking or fly fishing with Pop. In the summer of '89, I was stationed in the Appalachians. Our jurisdiction encompassed trails leading all the way up the mountain. Up there, the spruce thin out and clouds hang heavy even in fine weather at the base. I spent the summer clearing fallen branches from the walking trails after a couple of vicious storms over the winter. It was hack work reserved for the junior, but the truth of it was I didn't mind. The peak of the summer heat was spent, and visitor numbers dropped as the weather began to turn. Persistent drizzle had kept me desk-bound for the morning, and we were about to get lunch when he burst through the door. He let out a moan and collapsed to the floor. Stanley leaned down and propped him in a seated position. Water dripped from his shoulder-length hair. His limbs hung limp by his side. I handed Stanley a cup of water. Stanley used his index finger to push down his chin. When the water hit his tongue, the man tensed and his eyelids flicked open. He flailed his limbs and knocked the glass from Stanley's hand. The glass shattered on the floor, but the man paid it no mind. "It is out there," he said. "What is?" The man half turned and gripped Stanley's shirt and made balls with his fists. He repeated himself, pausing after each word. "It is out there." He started to sob. He released his grip on Stanley and buried his face in his hands. We lifted him onto a chair, and he pressed his face against the table and bawled. I grabbed the rucksack he had dropped to the floor. On the bottom right was a name tag behind a plastic sleeve. Lenny Porter from San Diego. There was a number at the bottom. "I'll make the call," Stanley said. When Stanley returned, Lenny was sat up staring blankly at the wall with red eyes. His face was gaunt, like he hadn't eaten in a week. Stanley closed the door. "I spoke to your father." Lenny didn't acknowledge the words. He sat motionless and unblinking. Stanley shuffled across to where I was sitting and pressed his palms on the table. Lenny left San Diego 2 weeks ago with a couple of friends. They planned to spend a month hiking the trail north. The father gave me 2 names, Freddie and Sabrina. We heard their names. Lenny leaned over and picked up his backpack. He rummaged frantically until he pulled out a stack of Polaroids. He flicked through the photographs and then slapped one on the table. Stanley and I leaned over. Flanking a fitter and healthier Lenny were what must have been Freddie, tall and wearing a baseball cap, and Sabrina, shorter and wearing a bright yellow top with an almost fluorescent blue belt pulling the fabric tight around her waist. Lenny fingered the photo, and tears welled in his eyes. What happened to them? He sobbed and shook his head. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Stanley took a map down from the wall and pushed it in front of Lenny. "We are here. Where did you last see them?" Lenny blinked away tears and concentrated. He squinted at the map and pressed his index finger down and tapped it. Stanley took a pencil from his breast pocket and marked the map with a cross. "I'll notify the police. Get the truck ready to go." During training, they told us about search and rescue operations. The Rangers are the first responders. It was part of the job. Twisted ankles and wandering off the trail and getting lost are not uncommon and no reason to get the police involved. But this felt different. I secured the gear in the truck, and Stanley appeared, flanked by a police officer in his early 30s. Harry is hitching a ride. His partner will take care of Lenny. We drove up the trail for about 15 minutes with the truck until it grew too narrow and treacherous. We split up the gear between us and set out on foot. Our destination was high up the mountain and far away from the trails. It was almost as if the trails deliberately avoided the area. We hacked our way through the thick forest. How had they ended up all the way out here? Stanley checked his watch constantly as we climbed. He wanted to get there before dark. I figured we would be lucky if we did. Stanley and Harry talked like old friends, asking about each other's wives and children. The park rangers are in effect an extension of law enforcement. It made sense to be friendly with the police, and living in a small mountain town made it almost inevitable. I like that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Stanley checked the map. "Almost there. Get your torches." "All right." Harry reached into his backpack and pulled out a flashlight. I did the same. "Do you know what's up this way?" Stanley said. I shook my head. "Somewhere up here is an old cabin. Hunters used it as a base back when you could still hunt up this way. The cross our friend Lenny put on the map is just about on top of it. Let's see if we can get there before there's no light left." We didn't make it by dark. Twilight gave to night with little warning. Soon we were relying on the light from our torches. Being on a trail in the sunshine lends a sense of security up here, even when you are alone. Now, surrounded by black and with the trail long behind us. An uneasiness grew in my stomach for the first time. Stanley paused and swept his torch. He muttered something under his breath. Harry took a few steps to the right, lowering his head and squinting. "There it is," he said. At the farthest reaches of Harry's torchlight, the cabin emerged from the woods. Stanley tapped Harry on the shoulder. "My eyes aren't what they used to be." The cabin should have been a source of comfort, but it only added to my unease. The roof was half caved in, and trees encroached on all sides, gnarled branches reaching out like fingers. The structure looked like it belonged more to the forest than to man. The only door hung askew on warped and rusted hinges. 2 windows had long ago lost their glass. Stanley shouldered open the door with a grunt. Leaves and branches covered the floor, blown in through the open windows and roof. We dumped the gear inside. Stanley took out a lantern and tied it to a horizontal branch a few paces from the front door. He flicked it on, and the light shone bright. If there was anyone lost nearby, they could not fail to see it. We split up and entered the forest, guided by our torches. Stanley instructed us to go no further than the reach of the lantern. It was our lighthouse on the horizon. The wind blew in fresh from the north. I buttoned up my jacket against the cold. The beam from the torch was strong, but aside from the narrow cone of light, the forest was a deep and full dark. Stanley and Harry called out the names of the 2 missing, Freddie and Sabrina. I did the same. Every few steps I stopped and listened. The forest was alive with the scurrying of animals and insects going about their business, and the constant rustling of the wind through the leaves. It was hopeless. This was needle in the haystack stuff. Freddie or Sabrina could be unconscious on the ground a few feet to my left, and I would never see them. We should camp and wait for first light. Harry's voice cut through the night, louder and with urgency. I skipped toward the sound as fast as I dared. The 2 torchlights of Harry and Stanley played close together. The beams of light trained on the forest floor. "You might not want to see this," Stanley said as I came up behind them. It was too late. By the light of the torches, I saw him, flat on his back, arms and legs bent at unnatural angles. I almost gagged when I saw his face. The left side caved in, a red, bloody mess fragmented with the white of the skull. The right side was intact, one green eye staring up, wide and unblinking. The remainder of the face had an almost serene expression. It was not the look of fear that you would expect from someone about to have half their face crushed. No skin remained below the neck. The contents of his torso picked so clean I could see his full spine. "What did that?" I stammered. I didn't get an answer. Stanley fished the Polaroid from his pocket and studied it under the torchlight. He handed it to Harry. "It's him. It's Freddie." Harry jumped and swung his torch out into the woods. "I swear I heard someone talking out there," Harry said. "We've been calling out their names too." "No, it wasn't that. It sounded like whispering. It's the wind through the trees." Harry didn't look convinced. He called out the name of Sabrina and listened. Only the sounds of the forest. Stanley shushed him. "There's nothing we can do for the boy now. Let's get back to the cabin and radio down news." Stanley took a few quick steps towards the cabin and motioned for us to follow. He seemed agitated. I didn't blame him. I followed on his heels. Harry lingered, searching the woods with his torch until he too fell in behind. The inside of the cabin felt like a sanctuary. Out of the wind and removed from the mangled corpse of Freddie, my mind processed the sight. I had gutted my fair share of fish, but this was different. I put my hand to my stomach and swallowed hard. I was overcome with a compulsion to repeat my unanswered question. What could have done that? Before I could, Harry gave us some more bad news. There was no response on the radio, only static. It wasn't surprising. The cabin sat in a depression between the peak we crested on our way in and the taller peak beyond. "We have to go back," I said. Harry shook his head. "Not in the dark, and not when there's someone still out there." "We don't know if that girl is dead or alive," Stanley said. "I heard her. You heard a whisper, is what you said. And if she was there, she would have come to the light. She'll come to the lantern, and we'll wait for her." Harry threw out his arms in protest. Stanley sighed. If she's dead, then we'll find her in the light of morning. If she's alive and nearby enough to whisper in our ears, then she'll come to us. Two rectangles of light shone through the open windows from the lantern outside, but the front room of the cabin still had dark, shadowy corners. Stanley took a second lantern and tied it to an old light fixture hanging from the ceiling. The room lit up as if under sunlight, but a cold light that gave the room a bare and unwelcome feel. I busied myself, clearing a space on the floor beside the black pot belly stove at the rear of the room. Stanley and Harry stood as statues, staring up at the wall behind me. I turned. Etched in black soot onto the blank wall was some kind of monster, long-limbed and with an elongated skull. It stared back at us through white blobs left clear of black. I took a step back and almost stumbled. What is that? I didn't need an answer. You don't live and work up in the mountains here without hearing the stories. Stories told dismissively by daylight, like you would talk about the monsters you imagined hiding in your closet as a kid. By night and around a campfire, the stories take on a graver tone, and the name of the monster is only ever whispered. Wendigo. Of course, I had never seen one. But if I had to imagine what one might look like, the painting in soot taking up the full height of the wall of the cabin was an exact match. I waited for one of the two men behind me to dismiss what we saw drawn on the wall, to make light of it and crack a joke. Neither did. Stanley uttered a simple instruction. No one goes outside without a weapon. Our shadows danced on the walls. The lantern hanging from the ceiling did not move. Stanley leaned and looked out the window. The lantern hanging from the tree branch swung back and forth like the pendulum of a grandfather clock. There was wind tonight, but not enough to do that. Stanley bent down and fished a rifle from the bag. My heart beat like a drum in my ears. And then something else. Whispers. What sounded like the whispers of a girl, entreating us, inviting us out into the darkness of the forest. Stanley inched open the door with the muzzle of his rifle. He stepped through the gap and watched the lantern on the tree come to a rest. He stood beside the lantern and searched the corners of the forest illuminated by the light. Nothing moved. Harry unclipped the leather strap on his belt and drew a pistol and went to the doorway. I felt naked and exposed with my hands empty. I took a step backwards, the Wendigo drawn in soot looming large behind and burning a hole in the back of my head. A shadow flashed through the trees, and Stanley swung the muzzle of the rifle and shot, the crack piercing the night. He raised the rifle to his shoulder and flicked it from side to side, searching for movement. The lantern boobed up and down. With a rush, a long-limbed creature dropped on his Stanley from above. He screamed and wrenched the rifle around, but had it knocked from his grip. Harry fired 2 shots, and the creature let out a wail. It bounded towards the door, and Harry slammed it shut. He pointed the pistol to the closed door and emptied the chamber. Harry took a step back and shot me a glance. Through the whole ordeal, I had not moved. I had barely breathed. Was it dead? Was Stanley okay? The window, I screamed. The long, thin fingers of the creature wrapped themselves around the inside of the window frame. Then the head appeared, uncannily human-like, but distorted and disfigured. The chin elongated and the teeth like razors and drenched in blood. Its eyes white and piercing, just like the etching on the wall. Harry grabbed me by the arm and hauled me into the back room of the cabin. He slammed shut the flimsy door. The back room was windowless, and the only light was a thin strip at the base from the lantern in the front room. We crouched together, our shoulders pressed against the door. We listened. The light patter of footsteps. 2 thin strips of black interrupted the strip of light at the base of the door. Something stood on the other side. "Come out, it is okay." It sounded like Stanley. Had he killed it? "Come out." Harry straightened, and I grabbed his shoulder. "Don't open the door," I whispered. "They say a Wendigo can imitate those it kills." My hand brushed against Harry's back and knocked the flashlight from his jacket pocket. I fumbled in the darkness until I found it, and I flicked it on. I scanned the room for something, anything we could use as a weapon. I walked away from the door and kicked at the twigs and leaves on the floor. All that was good for was kindling. Something smelled rotten. There must be a dead rat somewhere. It's Stanley, Harry said. I pointed the torch to him. His eyes were wide and wild. He must have killed it. He smiled at me and took a step back. The door slammed open and carried with it the rotten stench. What stood in the doorway was not Stanley, but the Wendigo. Harry kneeled before it, breathing in the noxious fumes. I shone the torch onto the creature. Its gray skin pulled tight on a gaunt frame. And then something glinted, a belt buckle. Around the creature's waist was the bright blue belt Sabrina wore in the Polaroid. Sabrina? I said. It turned to me and paused, tilting its head to the side. I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition, a brief moment where it knew the name. But then it snarled, its mouth opening wide and dripping with saliva. It wrapped two hands around the neck of Harry and leaned in. I acted instinctively, without thinking. I jumped at the creature, swinging the only weapon I had, the torch. I brought it down on its head with all the strength and adrenaline I had. It bucked and sent me flying into the front room beyond. I threw out my hands against the fall and grabbed the lantern Stanley had hung from the ceiling. It could not bear my weight, and the cord pulled out from the ceiling, and I fell with a thud. I jumped up at a burst of warmth from my stomach. The lantern had smashed on impact, and the white-hot filament broke free of its casing. I groaned in pain, and the creature lumbered forwards. I retreated into the corner of the room and pulled my knees up to my chest. It stood over me and opened its mouth, razor-sharp teeth gleaming white. Then the smell of smoke. The creature hopped and then scrambled backwards. The leaves and twigs covering the floor ignited under the heat from the lamp filament. A small flame burst up and the creature covered its face. Fire. It didn't like fire. I crawled forwards and swept as much of the kindling as I could grab onto the flames. The fire grew and the creature screamed. As smoke filled the room, it coughed and spluttered. It made one last effort to come at me and then retreated out of the room and into the forest. I went to the back room and grabbed Harry. We stumbled out of the cabin, the fire now spreading up the walls and to the roof. Stanley lay below the lantern hung from the tree, unmoving and with a chunk of flesh missing from his throat. We ran into the forest in the opposite direction the creature had gone. We first climbed up to the crest and then back down the mountain. We stumbled our way down by the light of the torch. Adrenaline coursed through our veins, and we imagined that thing right behind us, stalking us in the dark. When we finally crossed the trail, we followed it back down to the ranger station. A team of police and National Guard hiked up to the cabin after the sun rose. The cabin had burned to the ground, the pot-belly stove the only item that survived the blaze. The bodies of Stanley and Freddie were brought down. They said Stanley's flesh had been picked clean down to the skeleton. That was the first day of September, 1989. Sabrina was listed as a missing person, and her father spent a month in the mountains searching for her. But she's gone in every sense that matters. Turned to a Wendigo by hunger for human flesh. She transformed into something unrecognizable from where it began. Around campfires, people still tell stories of the Wendigo. I don't know if they truly believe they are out there, but I know I have seen it. Sometimes there really is a monster in the closet. Seventh story. This is how you kill a Wendigo. My twin sister Janessa was murdered at age 16. I witnessed it like a coward from atop a tree in the forest where it happened. I'd actually blacked out the memory for a while. I knew she was dead, but I couldn't remember how it happened. It wasn't until I tried therapy that it slowly came back to me. I was also reminded of how much my parents used to fight. Our family was planning on a camping trip the day before my sister's death. Before leaving, my parents erupted into another massive fight. Janessa and I had been looking forward to the trip, and once again, our parents' awful communication skills was ruining it before it even began. We snuck out of the house and took a lift to the forest. We left our phones at home, not caring whether our parents would be worried sick. We enjoyed ourselves the first day. I set up our tent, made a fire, had s'mores, and did all that stuff one typically associated with camping. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up alone in our tent. Outside, I hear my sister talking to someone. Inquisitive, I opened the tent and saw someone sitting at our now campfire who looked just like me. The figure transformed as soon as Janessa realized it wasn't me. Together we ran off, that thing rushing after us with heavy steps. I was faster than my sister and a bit more athletic. I grabbed onto a tree branch and climbed up a tree. Janessa was not so lucky. I watched it happen. I watched that thing tear my sister to pieces. I'm still haunted by her screams. I also understand now why she always appears badly mutilated in my nightmares. I stayed up in that tree overnight, my sister's corpse lying in the leaves. Her remaining eye always staring up at me. While in therapy, there was a moment when I suddenly recalled the hallucination I had the morning after my sister's death. I thought I saw her corpse clawing at the tree where I hid. She wanted me to come down and join her. It caused me to panic and cry out. A couple of men who had been camping in the area heard my screams, and at last I was rescued. My parents don't argue anymore. I hardly see them at all anymore since my sister's death. We're an upper-middle-class family. Over the last couple of years, my parents have frequently gone on vacations. They don't tell me where, and I never ask. I usually just wake up and find out they've left yet again. I'm out of high school now, and I have no career path yet. I've only really had one thing on my mind since I remembered what killed Janessa. Now I'm returning to the forest where she died. Now I'm going to go after the thing that killed her. I've been preparing for this, and if it is a Wendigo like I've suspected, then I'm more than ready to take my revenge. This is how I'm doing it. I took a lift again. Had the driver known what I was carrying in my bags, I doubt they would have let me in. As I sat there, the realization of what I was doing grew heavily on me. What the hell am I doing? I've been talking myself up for the last couple of years. As much as I want a glorious victory, the closer I've come to this day, the more I daydream about dying the same way Janessa did. As angry as I am with my parents, I don't think they deserve to lose their only remaining child. But I just can't move on knowing that thing is still out there. My legs were as dense as gold once I tried to exit the cab. The driver watched awkwardly as I struggled to pull myself out while putting on my backpack and working to carry the other supplies. Why was I doing this alone? I don't want anyone else getting hurt in this, I think was my reasoning. But God, I wish I wasn't out here doing this alone. With each step I took into the forest, the more the terror numbed. I was in the domain of the Wendigo now. I wasn't entirely sure how much of the information about them was real. I knew they could change their appearance. I know that their true form is just like the drawings people have made. There's no way to be an expert on these things unless you've actually dealt with one. I'm still not sure why it decided not to come after me. Based on its size, I doubt it would have had any difficulty. Instead, I'm still alive and crazy enough to come back and pick a fight. As I set up camp, I found myself jumping at the sound of any bird call or movement from a nearby animal. The way I hammered in my tent, I knew I was calling attention to myself. In my left pants pocket was a gun. Like werewolves, I'd heard that silver bullets were necessary to kill Wendigos. What if I'm wrong? The thought had been with me ever since I'd stepped foot back into these woods. I stopped frequently while setting up. Behind a nearby tree, I was almost certain I could see someone watching me and then hiding behind it again. I didn't bother to walk over and check it out. I finished up my tent and made up my sleeping bag inside. As I did this, I heard calls that sounded almost human off in the distance. It probably knew I was here. The minutes went by slowly, but soon dusk set upon the forest. I built a fire like the one Janessa and I had made. I roasted 2 marshmallows. Despite her absence, I made a s'more for her as well, resting it on a sizable rock near the fire. As I ate it, I thought about our last night together. All things considered, it was pleasant. Being twins, we had moments where we'd gotten into arguments like our parents. We'd fought one another. We had our problems. But that night had been pleasant. I'd actually been glad we'd decided to camp without our parents. As frightened as I still was, I felt a warmth not from the fire. A sense of calm overcame me as my memories were suddenly flooded with the good times Janessa and I had. The good times were not for long. I could hear footsteps not far behind me. Jeremy. I could never forget that voice. It sounded just like Janessa, but I knew it wasn't her. For some reason, I felt compelled to sit there calmly. As it approached, I could tell it was going over to take a seat at the rock where I'd left the Esmore. I glanced delicately to my right. I watched as a figure that looked almost identical to the Janessa I remembered pick up the Esmore and take a bite. "That's not yours." I surprised myself blurting that out. The fake Janessa ignored me, continuing to scarf it down. My terror turned to anger. The thing responsible for my sister's death was standing right next to me, mocking my grief. I didn't wait for it to finish. I pulled out my gun and pointed it directly at the figure. Before I could fire, the creature jumped to the left and turned around. I was struck with paralysis when I saw the mutilated face of my sister's corpse staring back at me. "I'm trapped, Jeremy." I struggled to keep aim. How dare that thing pretend to be her? It won't let me go, and it won't let you go either. We can be together again. It's so much nicer than going home to an empty house and unloving parents. She held her hand out to me. "Trust me, brother. Please." My trigger finger felt as though struck with a serious case of arthritis. Janessa took a step towards me. "Wait, no. It's not Janessa. Why did I suddenly forget that? Feed the forest with me, Jeremy. It's so much better being dead. PPR, prove it." At last I pulled the trigger. The creature hollered in pain as it fell to the ground. I'd hit a lung, which wouldn't be enough. I aimed the gun at its heart, but failed to pull the trigger as it rolled over and jumped back to its feet. Within seconds, it transformed from a corpse of my sister to its massive, dark, skeletal form with massive antlers. My mind was caught between fight and flight. I stood there aiming my gun, but desperately wanted to flee. As it rushed towards me, I chose the later option. I rushed over to the bag I'd left near the tent. Inside was a weapon I'd built myself. As I rushed over, I could tell I wasn't going to be able to outrun it. I fired another shot. The bullet lodged itself inside the neck of the beast. It cried out once more, "Buy me a bit of time to get to the bag." Why did I have it zipped up? As I tried to open it, the Wendigo rushed towards me again. Just like on the day of Janessa's death, I ran from the campsite, further into the forest. History was repeating itself. I was going to fail to avenge my sister. My parents were going to lose their last remaining child, all because I couldn't let this go. After at least several minutes, I'd somehow managed to keep outrunning it. I refused to slow down and look behind my shoulder. As I kept running, I noticed that I'd gone in some sort of circle. Up ahead of me was the campsite. I had a chance to grab the bag and pulled out the weapon. The closer I came to the campsite, the louder the Wendigo's footsteps became. I could almost feel the wind as the creature tried to claw at me. Once I reached the campsite, I put my hand out, clutching the bag. It felt like almost too great a risk to put my gun back in my pocket, but I needed free to pull out the weapon. I managed to do just that and used my left hand to pull out a long metal spike. I'd built it in such a way as to have the spike shoot out at the push of a button. The Wendigo wasn't going to slow down until it had me. I had no choice. I had to turn around. I had to have perfect timing. I had to collect my debt from the creature that took my twin sister. "Chew on this, you son of a bitch." I turned around, pressing the button that shot the spike out. Less than a foot from my face was the Wendigo, its cry so loud my ears hurt and began to ring. I'd done it. The spike had pierced the heart. Silver. Weakly, the Wendigo tried to swipe at me, but somehow lacked the strength. The next part was a gamble. I pulled out my gun and shot it in the head. It wasn't going to be enough to end the Wendigo, assuming what I'd read up was correct. I rushed back over to where I dropped my bag. Inside was a silver axe I'd also designed myself. When I returned, the creature was still conscious, letting out continuous, agonizing cries. I felt no sympathy. I hacked away at its wrists first. Its claws were the biggest threat, and I wanted them gone. Despite the weight lifting I'd been doing, it took over a dozen hacks to remove the first long-fingered hand. I pulled out my gun and shot it again in the head. It subdued the creature long enough for me to remove the second hand, and then I began on its head. As it began waking up again, I found myself screaming at the creature. I demanded it stay dead, calling it every insulting name that came to mind. Once I'd hacked most of the way through its head, I pulled it off. I kicked it a couple of feet away. The Wendigo no longer moved. It took over an hour, but I'd managed to put each limb, the head, and torso in the trash bags I'd brought along. One by one, I carried them back to the campsite. I lit another fire, burning each bag. It took until dawn for me to burn the body. I left the torso for last. It was a struggle, but I managed to remove the heart, rip it to pieces, and placed it in a silver box. After locking it, I looked around the site and decided to leave everything except my gun and the box behind. I was never particularly religious, but in the months leading up to my fight, I'd gotten to know a priest at a church in my area called Street Alphonsus. Luckily for me, he was there when I arrived with the silver box. His face went several shades paler when I showed it to him. Nevertheless, he escorted me to the back of the church with a pair of shovels and helped me bury it. Once done, I sat there, suddenly flooded with overwhelming emotions. I did it. The Wendigo had been slain. I'd done it. My sister's killer was dead. Its body was burned, its heart in pieces and buried. Janessa, I cried out. I kept my promise. I killed it. The Wendigo can't get anyone else. It won't kill anyone else. I placed my lowered head in my hands and continued to cry. I'm sorry I wasn't braver before. I whimpered. I'm so sorry I wasn't stronger before. I placed some flowers on my sister's grave an hour later. I talked to her tombstone as though she was there listening. I'd like to believe she was and that she was pleased with my accomplishment. Afterwards, I returned home and slept through the day and all night. Once morning came, I heard some noise downstairs. I went down to see that my parents were home and sitting down to breakfast. They stopped and looked over at me, saying nothing. I walked over and pulled up a seat. I had no appetite at all. How was your trip? Where did you guys go? My parents exchanged looks before my father replied. We went out west to visit your aunt and uncle. Did you enjoy it? I had difficulty keeping my chin from quivering as I lowered my head again. Jeremy, sweetie, what's wrong? Both my mother and my father got up and came over to me. Why do you keep leaving me alone? God damn it, I'm the only kid you have left. Don't you give a thought about me? They hugged me tightly, offering apologies. I could have sworn I felt another pair of hands on my shoulders. Their light touch was the most comforting of all. I really hope Janessa is proud of me. But a new task was ahead of me now. A harder task, perhaps. I was going to have to figure out how to reconcile with my parents. Our family had been broken long before her death. We'll never be whole again, but I know with some effort we can be better than this. I hope she can continue to give me the strength to put myself together as I progress into adulthood. 8th story. The time I saw a Wendigo. First things first, this happened to me when I was around 10. I've lived in Idaho all my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping, and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trails we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only know as Warm River, the river there never freezes over, and my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through probably 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I've heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights. I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never the metallic, grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curses before shooing me quickly to the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made the noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night. Whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination, I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day, and my life continued as normal. I was disconcerted, but chalked what happened up as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in retrospect. A few weeks later, I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here I would mess around with my cousins, our favorite activities being night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghost in the Graveyard, and other games like that. On one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. Because I was one of the younger cousin, I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge, and the older cousins hid in the nearby trees or at the base of the nearby mountain. As I was searching near the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint at our locations. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree known as the underwear tree. You can guess why. So I began trekking up toward the whistle. As I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued on wearily and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I find would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong, because you could always hear the adults having fun back at the lodge. I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott." I thought the whistle was my older cousins. "Come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking back down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me," so I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light in the branches of the tree and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature, I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran back to the lodge. The entire time I ran, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people, my cousins, at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking, and they took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that happened, and was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that. But those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago, the game, Until Dawn, became really popular, and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in game, I got chills down my spine. It was exactly what I saw. I did a ton of research on them. I figure someone must have gotten snowed in at that old lodge and resorted to cannibalism, but that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear that screech from time to time. It never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing, and it scares the hell out of me every time. I heard it earlier tonight, and that's why I decided to finally write my story down. Wish me luck, Reddit. 9th story. I helped a Wendigo, and I regret it all. When this happened, I was living in a small town with lots of forest nearby. It was small, and everybody was friendly with each other, living in an area where everyone knows everyone. My ma and pa didn't really take stranger danger seriously. Don't hop in a stranger's van. Don't take candy from people you don't know well, is the most I was told. Being young at the time I was taught this. I wasn't told why. I wasn't told of how monstrous humans could truly be. In my innocent mind, I saw no reasons for a person to want to hurt others. I believe this for most other creatures too. I wasn't afraid of animals or insects. So, it was no surprise that this would have happened. Seeing how stupid I was. It was an early spring, and I was going for a usual walk through the neighborhood and into the local woods. Admiring the flowers and listening to the birds' calls, I was drawn further into the darkness that was that forest. Soon, I didn't even know where I was. The trees weren't familiar. I was deeper into the woods than I'd gone before. And just before I traced my steps back home, I heard something. Help! The voice was dry, raspy, and quiet. It sounded strained, like whoever was speaking felt pain to do so. I turned back, trying to find out who or what was calling for me, although my innocent mind was certain it was a person. Over here, I followed the voice and soon found the creature in front of me, its long limbs wrapped in the thorny brambles it was trapped in, its face covered by its long, blood-soaked hair. Please, help me, child. Despite what I wanted to do, my gut told me not to go closer to it. It was dangerous. I ignored the feeling. As I tried to remove the brambles from the creature's body, I only succeeded in cutting my hands. I can't get you out, I sadly told the creature. Try harder. You don't want me to die here, do you? It shook its head, removing the few vines I'd managed to pull off its antlers. Of course I don't want you to die. I then remember my mother's pruning shears. I'd seen her use them to cut plants before, so they should work, right? We'll be right back. I can get some tools to cut you free. As I got up to leave, it grabbed my leg. Don't go. I'll be lonely. We can free me later. The creature pulled me back down to the ground. I stared at it again, noticing all the bones poking through its skin. That's all it really was. Skin and bones. Breaking the eerie silence, it spoke again. My name is Inoki. What is yours? I didn't hesitate to respond. I'm T. After that, we started to talk more. Until the sun started going down, then I went home. That night, I stayed awake in bed, wondering about my new friend. How did he get stuck there, anyway? The next day, I brought the pruning shears, and with some effort, I removed the brambles. Inoki never thanked me for the help. He just tried to stand up, but he was too wounded to move. I innocently asked, do you want me to go get my parents? They have Band-Aids. But he shook his head. I need more than that. I need food to get stronger. And so I ran home and got some food, mostly biscuits and some bread. I can't eat that. He turned away from the food in disgust. What do you eat then? He looked around and then pointed at a small bird. It had gotten tangled in the nearby brambles. It was thrashing around, trying to get free. Go get that for me. I remember feeling scared in that moment. I love birds. Whenever I found a wounded one, I tried to take care of it before my pa would take it to the vet while secretly just putting it down. But without even realizing what I was doing, I'd already removed the bird from the brambles. I watched in horror as Inoki ate the poor thing. He didn't seem to like it, but he did anyway. I kept visiting him every day, bringing him more birds or other poor animals for weeks. He was looking better each day, yet still bone thin, until eventually I came to him with another bird. He wasn't sitting in the place he always sat. I called out for him, but he didn't come. Then I heard the trees above me shake. I looked up just in time to run as it jumped down and chased after me. It caught up to me in no time. It had longer legs and was faster, and it grabbed my leg, and its claws sunk into me. I screamed and screamed until half of the local neighborhood came running into the woods. One or two even had guns, but Inoki got away before he could be killed. I never set foot into the woods again. After I was patched up and told my story to the local newspaper, I was told about what Inoki really was. A Wendigo. I was told I was goddamned lucky to have gotten away, but stupid to have even helped him. My parents moved away after that, and I was properly taught about stranger danger. Not sure if it was a Wendigo, but something odd happened. When I was 8 years old, both of my parents worked full-time. My dad was predominantly on third shift at his job, and my mom was an elementary school teacher. We lived literally right up the road from my grandparents in a very small town. It was getting close to my 9th birthday when I contracted strep throat and scarlet fever. I was severely sick, could barely speak, had the first case of cold sweats that I remember in my life, and could barely pull myself out of bed to even use the restroom. I was absolutely miserable, and of course, being as young as I was, I didn't take the pain very well. My poor mother was at a loss of what to do, with her working and my dad needing to use daylight hours to sleep. The first day, I was sick. Perhaps it was a Tuesday? My birthday would fall on a Friday. My dad stayed up most of the day with me, made me food, let me sleep in his lap on the couch, wiped my forehead down, made sure I took my medicine, etc. But on the second day, my grandmother had called and offered to let me stay at her house so my dad could sleep. He said yes, and woke me up around 7 that morning to drive me up to her home. My grandfather also worked at this time too, so he was already gone to work when I arrived there. I don't remember too much of the early morning. I probably just slept in my grandmother's bed, tossing and turning when I'd wake up feeling extra bad. She encouraged me to swallow my awful tasting medicine a little more gently than my dad did. She did fix me some tomato soup to try and eat, and it was the first time since I gotten sick that I had an appetite. I should mention my grandmother had this cute Yorkshire Terrier named Samson. He was very docile, not like the usual annoying, barking all the time terriers. Samson came into the room and curled up next to me as I dozed. I didn't know when I woke up at some point. It had to be the early afternoon/lunchtime because I could hear the TV faintly from the living room on some game show. My grandmother had a ritual of eating her lunch while watching a game show. I think it was The Price is Right. I was trying to fall back asleep because I had gotten this really bad headache, maybe from dehydration. I was on the verge of sleep when I was jolted awake by this Samson yelp that erupted from the living room. The terrier curled up next to my feet, perked up, but didn't move. I knew I had heard his name being called too, but it was odd he didn't respond. Samson. My grandmother called again. Samson. Samson. The dog still didn't run out of the room to her. I was confused, as he was so obedient to my grandmother. He was almost frozen, staring at the cracked, open door, but making no attempt to go to her. She called Samson maybe 3 or 4 more times. Then I got annoyed. I remember flinging the covers off of me. Of course, my clothes are sticky with sweat, and I just generally feel uncomfortable and groggy. I stumble out of the room, wiping my eyes, asking Grandma, "Do you need Samson?" "He's in your room with me." I'm in the living room, and I have to do a double take. The TV is still on and blaring. There's a bowl of soup sitting on the coffee table and an open Pepsi next to it, but my grandmother isn't anywhere in the room. Maybe she's in the bathroom? I crossed the room and went past the kitchen, empty too. I got to the bathroom door, which was shut, and knocked. Nothing. I then opened it. No one was in there. The house is empty. It's not a huge house either. I've covered all of the rooms. So yes, my first reaction was to get scared. I could clearly hear my grandmother calling for the dog, but she's not anywhere inside. I could feel my hands and feet get all tingly. I start shouting for my grandma, but my voice is just echoing through the small, cramped home. Samson had gotten up at this point and was sitting near the couch, looking completely undisturbed. I fumbled for the remote and turned the TV off and yelled, more like wheezed, to the top of my lungs, which you can imagine how painful this was with a scratchy, infected throat, "Grandma." The worst part happened next. I heard her shouting my name back, clear as ever, like she was standing only feet away. I start crying now, scared out of my mind. I feel like maybe it has to be a ghost. I grew up with scary ghost stories courtesy of my dad, and I'm convinced now I'm in the room with a ghost. And then she / whatever this was, proceeded to call my name again. Then there was a second voice, definitely not my grandmother's. It was deeper, definitely more masculine, and absolutely terrifying as it shouted, "Come to the front door." I did not do that. Instead, I made sure to run back to my grandparents' bedroom, lock the door, and pick up the telephone on their nightstand. I called my own home phone, and my dad's sleepy voice answered. Through a barely comprehensible voice, I managed to croak something like, "Daddy, there's someone in the house, and I can't find Grandma. She's gone." My dad, of course, said he jumped out of bed, grabbed his Swiss Army knife he kept in a drawer next to the bed, and ran down the road to the house in his PJs and bare feet. He ran up to the front door, jiggled the handle. It was locked. So he made his way around, and since he knew the garage code, just punched it in and got inside. A quick sweep of the 3 rooms of the home showed no one was in there. It's not like there was really anywhere to hide. I ran out of the room once I was sure he was there and began bawling in his arms. He kept reassuring me there was no one here, and then asked if I didn't know where Grandma possibly was. I said I hadn't, and explained I'd woken up to her calling for Samson, but she hadn't been anywhere there. This was back when cell phones were definitely around, but there were no iPhones, and my grandparents certainly wouldn't have been buying them anyway. My dad had one, but not on him at the time. I could tell he was trying to keep calm. So he just said we would need to go back to our house. I was sure he was probably going to call the police at that point, just because my grandma still hadn't popped up and her car had been in the garage when he got in. If she'd left, she'd gone on foot. We hadn't even made 2 steps out of the driveway when from my grandma's neighbor's house, my grandma was strolling out, chatting to the neighbor. She saw my dad and then me, cry my eyes out, and immediately ran over to see what was wrong. She was super apologetic. She said she'd stepped out right when she'd heated up her soup to go see her neighbor, who'd called about looking at something my grandma was going to buy. My grandma had figured I was asleep and she'd only be gone for 10 or 15 minutes. At first, people may have assumed I was feverish, therefore delusional, but I still stand by what happened. I know for a fact I was definitely alone in the house, save for Samson, but the voices I heard were real. For a while, I was hesitant to go back to my grandma's house, because this happened in the middle of the day. I later read stories at school about wendigos, or creatures that would disguise their voices to lure people. This was the closest explanation I could ever form about what I heard. I never shared to anyone that I thought it was for sure a wendigo, and chalked it up to maybe just a ghost. I'm close to my 20s now. Last year was the first time I shared this story fully to my grandpa, who used to just say the fever must have made me had bad dreams. We were sitting on the front porch of the house, smoking cigarettes and exchanging anecdotes. When I finished telling him, for the first time he looked sort of disturbed about it. He finally put his cigarette out and just stared out into the road. Then he cleared his throat and looked over at me. You know, he said slowly, some funny things used to happen around that time. In the middle of the night, I'd wake up to take a piss or something. When I'd first sit up in the bed, I could hear your grandma sleeping away, snoring. He chuckled, but his face grew serious again. Anyways, I'd always hear her calling for the dog. I tried to remain looking calm, but my voice still shook when I asked him, even when she was sleeping? Sleep talking. No, he shook his head. I heard her calling from outside, maybe the living room. I don't know, honey. She'd call for the dog. She'd call my name. All while she was really sleeping next to me, sleeping like a baby. Have you ever told anyone? No, I don't want to scare her. She's real scared of ideas like ghosts and stuff. That's why when you were younger and that thing happened, I told her just to remember you'd been sick, fever and all. Probably having nightmares. He looked gravely at me. Don't repeat this to her, please. Honey, she's really not the type to be scaring. Of course, I wanted to cry. I had this itchy, creepy feeling suddenly about being at the house. Grandpa, do you still hear it sometimes? Oh yes, he was now reaching into his breast pocket to get out another cigarette. Every night, but you just gotta remember not to do what it says. Even the dog figured it out. If it says to come to the door, you stay away from the door. If it says, I don't know, come here, you just stay still in the room until it quits calling. With that, he asked to borrow my lighter again. 10th story. After this weekend, I will never go camping again. I never should have come on this stupid camping trip. That's what I kept telling myself as I huddled in the damp darkness, straining my ears for any sound that might give away the presence of what? I didn't even know anymore. All I knew was that something was out there in the endless sea of pines, something that had already taken Eric's dad, and now it was hunting us. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start at the beginning, back when this was just supposed to be a fun weekend getaway with my friends. God, was that really only 2 days ago? It feels like a lifetime. My name's Charlie, and I'm in 8th grade at Millbrook Middle School. Just your average 13-year-old kid, I guess. Not particularly athletic or popular, but I got a solid group of friends. That's who I was with when everything went to hell. Eric, Peter, Jason, and Robert. Eric had been going on and on about this camping trip for weeks. His dad, Mr. Larson, was some kind of outdoorsman and had promised to take Eric and a few friends deep into the Adirondacks for a real wilderness experience. No cell phones, no iPads, just good old-fashioned camping. Eric was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. Come on, Charlie, it'll be awesome, he'd said, grinning from ear to ear. My dad's going to teach us how to track animals, build shelters, all that survival stuff. I'd been hesitant at first. The thought of being out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by who knows what, didn't exactly fill me with enthusiasm. But peer pressure is a hell of a thing, and eventually, I caved. So there we were, piled into Mr. Larson's massive SUV early on a crisp Friday morning in October. The leaves were just starting to turn, painting the world in a riot of reds and golds. It should have been beautiful. Instead, as we drove deeper and deeper into the wilderness, leaving civilization far behind, I felt a growing sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. I glanced around at my friends, wondering if any of them felt the same. Eric, of course, was practically vibrating with excitement, his mop of blonde hair bouncing as he pointed out landmarks to his dad. He'd always been the adventurous one of our group, always pushing us to try new things, take risks. Sometimes it led to amazing experiences. Other times, well, let's just say Eric's ideas didn't always pan out. Next to Eric sat Peter, his nose buried in a thick paperback. Classic Peter. While the rest of us were busy with sports or video games, Peter devoured books like they were going out of style. He pushed his glasses up his nose and flipped another page, completely oblivious to the world around him. In the back row with me were Jason and Robert. Jason was sound asleep, his bulky frame taking up more than his fair share of the seat. The gentle giant of our group, Jason was the kind of guy who could bench press a small car, but wouldn't hurt a fly. His snores filled the car, providing an oddly comforting background noise. Robert, on the other hand, was wide awake, his dark eyes darting nervously from window to window. Out of all of us, Robert was the one I was most surprised to see on this trip. He wasn't exactly the outdoorsy type, more of a computer geek, really, always talking about coding and AI and stuff I barely understood. But here he was, clutching his backpack like a lifeline. "You okay, Rob?" I whispered, not wanting to wake Jason or interrupt Mr. Larson's running commentary on the local flora and fauna. Robert jumped slightly, then gave me a weak smile. "Yeah, just not used to all this nature, you know. It's so big." I nodded, understanding completely. The farther we drove, the smaller I felt, like we were being swallowed up by the vast, indifferent wilderness. After what felt like hours, Mr. Larson finally pulled off onto a barely visible dirt road. We bounced and jolted along for another 20 minutes before he brought the car to a stop in a small clearing. "All right, boys," he boomed, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "This is where our real adventure begins. Grab your packs. We've got about a 5-mile hike to our campsite." 5 miles? Through this dense forest? I exchanged a worried glance with Robert, but there was no backing out now. We piled out of the car, shouldering our heavy backpacks. Mr. Larson led the way, machete in hand to clear any obstacles, with Eric right on his heels. The rest of us fell in a line behind them, with me bringing up the rear. As we hiked, the forest seemed to close in around us. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining overhead to block out most of the sunlight. The air grew cooler, damper. Strange bird calls echoed in the distance, unlike anything I'd ever heard before. But it wasn't until we were about halfway to the campsite that I first noticed something was off. It was subtle at first, just a feeling of being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something lurking in the shadows between the trees. But there was never anything there. Just more trees, stretching endlessly in every direction. Then I started to notice the silence. It fell suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch. One moment, the forest was alive with the sounds of birds and small animals. The next, nothing. Just the crunch of our boots on the leaf-strewn ground and our labored breathing. I wasn't the only one who noticed. I saw Robert's head swiveling back and forth, his eyes wide with fear. Even Jason, usually so laid back, seemed on edge. "Hey, Mr. Larson," Peter called out, his voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Is it normal for the forest to get this quiet?" Mr. Larson paused, frowning slightly. Well, sometimes animals will go quiet if there's a predator in the area. Bear, maybe, or a mountain lion. Nothing to worry about, boys. They're more afraid of us than we are of them. His words were meant to be reassuring, but they had the opposite effect on me. A bear? A mountain lion? How is that supposed to make us feel better? We pressed on, the silence growing heavier with each step. And then, just as the last of the daylight was fading, we heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold and my heart leap into my throat. It was a scream, high-pitched, agonized, and very, very human. Mr. Larson froze, his hand flying up in a gesture for us to stop. What the hell was that? He muttered, more to himself than to us. Dad! Eric's voice was small, scared. I never heard him sound like that before. Dad, what do we do? For a long moment, Mr. Larson didn't move. Then he seemed to shake himself, turning to face us with a forced smile. It's probably nothing, boys. Maybe some animal that sounds like a person. But just to be safe, we're going to set up camp right here for the night. Okay. We nodded mutely, too scared to argue. As we started to unpack our gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were making a terrible mistake. We should have turned back, should have run as fast as we could back to the car and civilization. But we didn't. And as the night closed in around us, bringing with it a chorus of unnatural sounds and fleeting shadows just beyond the reach of our flashlights, I realized with growing horror that it might already be too late. We set up camp in a small clearing, our tents forming a tight circle around the fire pit Mr. Larson insisted on building. Fire keeps the animals away, he said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had made that scream wasn't afraid of a little campfire. As the flames flickered to life, casting long shadows across our faces, I studied my friends. Eric was trying to put on a brave face, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Peter had his nose in his book again, but he wasn't turning any pages. Jason sat on a log, his massive frame hunched over, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. And Robert was muttering to himself, fingers flying over the screen of a small device he'd pulled from his pocket. Hey, Mr. Larson's sharp voice made us all jump. I thought I said no electronics. Robert, hand it over. Robert clutched the device to his chest, his eyes wide. But Mr. Larson, I dash. No buts. This is about experiencing nature, remember? Now, give it here. Reluctantly, Robert surrendered the gadget. Mr. Larson pocketed it with a satisfied nod. All right, boys. Who wants to learn how to roast a perfect marshmallow? But none of us were in the mood for campfire treats. The forest around us seemed alive with whispers and movement, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. Mr. Larson, I finally worked up the courage to ask, what if that scream wasn't an animal? Shouldn't we try to help? He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Look, Charlie, I know you're scared. All of you are. But trust me, there's nothing out there that we need to worry about. Probably just a fox or something. Now, let's try to get some sleep. Okay? Things will look better in the morning. But sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake in my tent, shared with Robert, listening to the sounds of the forest. Robert's whispers broke the silence. Charlie? You awake? I rolled over to face him. Yeah, can't sleep either. He shook his head, his face pale in the dim light of the moon filtering through the tent fabric. There's something wrong here, Charlie. Really wrong. I've been tracking it. Tracking what? I asked, my heart beginning to race. The anomalies. The electromagnetic disturbances. They're off the charts out here. That's what my device was for, before Mr. Larson took it. Charlie, I don't think we're dealing with animals. I think there's something else out here. Something not natural. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell Robert he was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew he was right. There was something fundamentally wrong about these woods, something that set every nerve on edge. A sudden scream pierced the night, much closer this time. We bolted upright, our eyes wide with terror. It was followed by the sound of running feet, branches snapping, and then silence. "Boys, everything okay in there?" Mr. Larson's voice came from outside, tense and alert. Before we could answer, another scream split the air. This time, I recognized the voice. It was Eric. What happened next was a blur of confusion and terror. We burst out of our tents to find Eric's empty, a trail of disturbed undergrowth leading into the dark forest. Mr. Larson was already charging down the path, flashlight in one hand, hunting knife in the other. "Eric! Eric! Answer me!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. We followed, stumbling through the darkness, branches whipping at our faces. The beam of Mr. Larson's flashlight danced crazily ahead of us, illuminating snippets of the forest, a gnarled root here, a flash of leaves there. And then, suddenly, the light fell on Eric. He was standing in a small clearing, his back to us, completely motionless. "Eric! Thank God!" Mr. Larson breathed, rushing forward. "Are you okay? What happened?" Eric didn't respond, didn't move. As we got closer, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was very, very wrong. "Eric!" I called out, my voice shaking. "Eric, come on, man. You're scaring us." Slowly, so slowly, Eric began to turn. And as his face came into view, illuminated by the harsh beam of the flashlight, I heard someone, maybe me, maybe all of us, let out a terrified scream. It wasn't Eric. Not anymore. The thing that faced us wore Eric's clothes, had Eric's blonde hair. But the face was wrong. Distorted. The eyes were too large. The mouth a gaping maw filled with needle-sharp teeth. And the skin, it seemed to ripple and shift as if something was moving beneath it. "Run," Mr. Larson whispered, his voice choked with horror. "Run." We turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush, blind with terror. Behind us, I could hear something pursuing. Not footsteps, but a wet, slithering sound that seemed to come from all around us. I don't know how long we ran. Time lost all meaning in that nightmarish flight through the dark forest. All I knew was the burning in my lungs, the sting of branches against my skin, and the overwhelming need to get away. Finally, gasping for air, we burst into another clearing. This one was different. In the center stood a massive, ancient tree, its gnarled branches reaching towards the star-filled sky like grasping fingers. At its base was a dark opening, a cave or a hollow in the trunk, I couldn't tell. In there, Mr. Larson panted, gesturing towards the opening. "Quick, before it catches up." We didn't hesitate. One by one, we squeezed through the narrow opening, finding ourselves in a spacious hollow within the tree. It was pitch black inside, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. "Is everyone here?" Mr. Larson whispered, his voice tight with fear. "Sound off." "Here," I gasped. "Present," came Peter's shaky voice. "Why, yeah," stammered Robert. A grunt from Jason confirmed his presence. 5 of us. We'd lost Eric, but the rest of us had made it. For now. Outside, we could hear something moving, circling, waiting. "Mr. Larson," Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. What was that thing?" In the darkness, I heard Mr. Larson take a deep, shuddering breath. "I don't know, son. I've never seen anything like it. But I swear, I'm going to get you boys out of here." Somehow, as we huddled together in the hollow of that ancient tree, surrounded by the sounds of something inhuman prowling just outside, I realized that our ordeal was far from over. Whatever that thing was, whatever had taken Eric, it wasn't going to give up easily. And as the long night wore on, I began to wonder, was it just Eric it had taken? Or was it possible that none of us were who we thought we were anymore? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I pressed myself further into the damp earth of our hiding place, straining my ears for any sound that might give away the creature's location. But all I could hear was the ragged breathing of my friends and the wild pounding of my own heart. What had started as a simple camping trip had become a nightmare beyond imagination. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible thought began to form. What if we never made it out of these woods? As the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the cracks in our wooden sanctuary, I realized that our fight for survival was only just beginning. The pale light of dawn brought little comfort. We'd spent the night huddled in that hollowed-out tree, jumping at every sound, every whisper of wind through the leaves. None of us had slept. How could we after what we'd seen? "All right, boys," Mr. Larson whispered, his voice hoarse. "We need to make a plan. We can't stay here forever." "But what about that thing?" Peter asked, pushing his glasses up his nose with a trembling hand. "It's still out there, isn't it?" Mr. Larson's silence was answer enough. I could see the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, aging him years in a single night. He was supposed to protect us, to keep us safe. But how could anyone be prepared for something like this? "We need to get back to the car," he finally said. "It's our only chance of getting out of here and finding help for Eric." His voice caught on his son's name, and I saw a flash of raw pain cross his face before he composed himself. "But we don't even know where we are," Jason pointed out, his usual confidence replaced by fear. "We ran for who knows how long last night. We could be miles from our campsite." I might be able to help with that," Robert said hesitantly. We all turned to look at him. "Remember that device Mr. Larson confiscated? It wasn't just for tracking anomalies. It also has GPS." Mr. Larson's eyes widened. He quickly dug into his pocket, pulling out Robert's device. "Can you use this to get us back to the car?" Robert nodded, taking the device with reverent care. "I think so. It'll take me a few minutes to boot it up and get a signal, but dash." A blood-curdling shriek cut through the morning air, so close it seemed to vibrate through the very wood around us. We froze, hardly daring to breathe. "It's found us," I whispered, terror clawing at my throat. Mr. Larson's face set in grim determination. "Okay, change of plans. Robert, you work on getting that GPS going. The rest of us are going to make a run for it. We'll try to draw it away, give Robert some time. Once you've got our location, try to make your way back to the car. If we're not there, just go. Get help." "But Mr. Larson dash," I started to protest. "No arguments, Charlie. It's our best chance." He turned to Robert. "You think you can do this, son?" Robert gulped but nodded, his fingers already dancing over the device's screen. "Good man. All right, boys. On my mark, we run. Robert, you stay here until it's clear, understood?" We nodded, our hearts pounding in our chests. Mr. Larson peered out of the hollow, then held up 3 fingers. 2, 1, now! We burst out of the tree, sprinting in the opposite direction from where we'd heard the cry. I could hear it behind us almost immediately, that wet, slithering sound that haunted my nightmares. But we didn't look back. We couldn't. We ran until our lungs burned, weaving between trees, leaping over fallen logs. Mr. Larson led the way, his longer strides keeping him just ahead of us. And then, without warning, he wasn't. One moment he was there, crashing through the underbrush. The next, he was gone, as if the forest had swallowed him whole. "Mr. Larson!" Peter cried out, skidding to a halt. We stopped, spinning around wildly, searching for any sign of him. There was nothing, no sound, no movement, just the eerie stillness of the forest. "We have to go back," Jason said, his voice shaking. "We can't just leave him." But even as he spoke, we heard it, that terrible, inhuman shriek, coming from the direction Mr. Larson had vanished. It was answered by another cry, this one undoubtedly human. A scream of pure agony that cut off abruptly, leaving behind a silence more terrifying than any sound. "Oh God," Peter whimpered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." I felt like I was going to be sick. Mr. Larson was gone, just like Eric, taken by whatever ungodly thing lurked in these woods. And we were alone. "We need to get back to Robert," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant in my own ears. "We need to get out of here." The others nodded mutely, too shocked and scared to argue. We turned and began to make our way back the way we'd come, moving as quietly as we could. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of adrenaline through our systems. When we finally reached the hollow tree, we found Robert waiting for us, his face pale with fear. "I heard the screams," he whispered. "Mr. Larson." I shook my head, unable to form the words. Robert's face crumpled, but he took a deep breath and held up his device. "I've got our location," he said. "The car's about 3 miles northeast of here. But guys, there's something else you need to see." He turned the screen towards us. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was looking at, a mess of lines and colors, like some abstract painting. But then I realized what it was, a topographical map of the area. And there, right where we were standing, was a swirling vortex of energy readings, pulsing like a malevolent heart. "What is that?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert's eyes were wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not natural. And I think it might be what's behind everything that's happening here." As we stared at the pulsing anomaly on the screen, a chilling realization swept over me. We weren't just lost in the woods. We were trapped in the heart of something ancient and evil, something that had already taken 2 of our number. And as another inhuman howl echoed through the forest, closer this time, I knew with terrifying certainty that it wouldn't stop until it had all of us. "We need to move," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Now!" As we gathered what little supplies we had and prepared to make our desperate bid for escape, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. Some piece of the puzzle that would explain why we were here, why this was happening to us. But there was no time to dwell on it. We had to run, had to fight, had to survive. Because if we didn't make it out of these woods, no one would ever know the horror that lurked within them. And so, with heavy hearts and terror nipping at our heels, we set out into the forest once more, praying that we would live to see another dawn. We moved through the forest like ghosts, our feet barely making a sound on the leaf-strewn ground. Robert led the way, his eyes glued to the device in his hands, guiding us towards what we hoped was salvation. But with each step, the feeling of wrongness grew stronger, a palpable miasma that seemed to cling to our skin. "Wait," Peter suddenly whispered, grabbing my arm. "Do you hear that?" We all froze, straining our ears. At first, I heard nothing but the usual forest sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. But then, underneath it all, I caught it. A low, pulsing hum, just on the edge of hearing. "It's getting stronger," Robert muttered, tapping at his device. "The energy readings are off the charts. We're getting close to something." "The car?" Jason asked hopefully. Robert shook his head. "No, this is different. I've never seen readings like this before." As if in response to his words, the forest around us began to change. The trees seemed to twist, their bark rippling like water. The ground beneath our feet softened, becoming spongy and unstable. And the air filled with whispers, countless voices speaking in languages I'd never heard before. "Guys," I said, my voice shaking, "I think we should turn back." But even as the words left my mouth, I realized it was too late. The forest behind us had changed, becoming an impenetrable wall of writhing vegetation. We had no choice but to press forward. As we stumbled onward, the world around us continued to warp and shift. Colors bled into one another, creating impossible hues that hurt to look at. The ground rose and fell in nauseating waves. And always that maddening whisper in the air, growing louder with each step. Finally, we emerged into a clearing unlike anything I'd ever seen. In the center stood a massive structure, a twisted amalgamation of metal and organic matter. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, tendrils of energy arcing out to touch the trees surrounding it. What is that thing?" Jason breathed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Robert was furiously tapping at his device, his face pale. It's not from here. Not from Earth. These readings, they're completely alien. As we stood there, try to process what we were seeing, a figure emerged from behind the structure. My heart leapt into my throat. It was Eric's dad, Mr. Larson. But something was wrong. He moved with an unnatural fluidity, his joints bending in ways they shouldn't. And his eyes were completely black, reflecting the pulsing light of the alien structure. Mr. Larson? Peter called out hesitantly. Are you okay? Mr. Larson's head snapped towards us, a smile spreading across his face that was too wide, too full of teeth. When he spoke, his voice was layered with others, as if 1,000 beings were speaking through him at once. Okay. Oh, I'm more than okay. I'm perfect. We're perfect. And soon, you'll be too. I managed to choke out. Mr. Larson's grin widened impossibly further. Oh yes, you see, boys, we've been waiting for you. For so long, we've been trapped here in this little pocket of reality. But now, thanks to you, we can finally break free. As he spoke, more figures emerged from the shadows. Eric, the park ranger we'd seen at the trailhead. Other hikers we didn't recognize. All moving with that same unnatural grace. All with those terrible black eyes. You were our beacons, not Mr. Larson continued. Your fear, your confusion, your very humanity, it all served to weaken the barriers holding us here. And now, we're ready to spread across your world. The truth hit me like a physical blow. We hadn't stumbled upon this horde by accident. We've been lured here, chosen. Why us? Robert asked, his scientific curiosity somehow overriding his terror. Why children? Not Mr. Larson laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Children are so wonderfully malleable, so full of potential, the perfect vessels for our kind. And you five? Oh, you five are special. You each carry a spark of something unique, something we need. He pointed at each of us in turn. The adventurer, the scholar, the protector, the visionary, and you, his black eyes locked onto mine, the survivor. Together, you'll be the key to our expansion, our invasion force. We'll never help you, Jason growled, stepping protectively in front of us. Oh, but you will not, Mr. Larson purred. You don't have a choice. In fact, it's already begun. Haven't you noticed? With dawning horror, I looked down at my hands. My skin was rippling, just like the bark of the trees had been. I could feel something moving beneath it, something trying to get out. No, I whispered. No, this can't be happening. But it was. I could feel my thoughts changing, alien concepts and memories flooding my mind. I looked at my friends and saw the same terror and confusion on their faces. We were changing. We were becoming them. As the alien presence clawed its way in my mind, one last, desperate thought managed to break through. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Somehow, someway we had to fight this. We had to warn the world. But even as I clung to that final shred of humanity, I felt it slipping away, replaced by something vast and unknowable. And as the clearing filled with inhuman laughter, I realized that our camping trip had been more than just a nightmare. It was the beginning of the end of the world. As the alien presence invaded my mind, I felt myself slipping away. Memories, hopes, fears, all of it was being consumed by this otherworldly intelligence. But deep down, in a place I didn't even know existed, a spark of defiance ignited. No, this is my body, my mind, my life. I don't know where the strength came from, but suddenly I was fighting back. I visualized walls in my mind, barriers against the invading consciousness. It wasn't easy. It felt like trying to hold back an ocean with my bare hands. But slowly, inch by inch, I began to reclaim myself. Charlie, I heard Robert's voice, distant and distorted. Charlie, what's happening to you? I opened my eyes, not realizing I had closed them. The clearing swam into focus. My friends were on their knees, their bodies twisting and changing as the alien presence took hold. but they were looking at me with a mixture of awe and hope, because I was standing, unchanged, human. The thing wearing Mr. Larson's face snarled, its features contorting into something inhuman. Impossible, it hissed. You can't resist us. No one can resist us. But I had. Somehow, some way, I had found the strength to fight back. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. About humanity. You're wrong, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. We can resist. We will resist. I reached out to Jason, the closest to me. Come on, big guy. I know you're in there. Fight it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Jason's hand twitched, reaching for mine. I grabbed it, and it was like an electric current passed between us. I could feel Jason's essence, his humanity, surging back to the surface. That's it, I encouraged, reaching for Peter with my other hand. Come on, guys. Remember who you are. One by one, my friends began to shake off the alien influence. It wasn't easy. I could see the strain on their faces, the battle raging inside them, but they were doing it. They were coming back. Then not Mr. Larson let out a shriek of rage and frustration. The air around us began to vibrate, the alien structure pulsing with angry red light. You fools, it howled. You have no idea what you're giving up. The power, the knowledge, it could all be yours. We don't want it, I said firmly. Not at this price. As my friends regained control of themselves, something strange began to happen. The clearing around us started to shift and warp like reality itself was coming undone. The alien structure flickered, becoming translucent. No, the creature wearing Mr. Larson's face wailed. No, you're ruining everything. I understood then. Our resistance, our humanity, it was somehow undoing whatever force had brought this thing into our world. We were closing the door it had tried to open. Guys, I said urgently, we need to get out of here. Now, we ran. We ran like we'd never run before, crashing through the underbrush as the world fell apart around us. Trees melted into nothingness. The ground rippled like water, and all the while that unearthly howl followed us, filled with rage and despair. I don't know how long we ran or how we found our way, but suddenly, miraculously, we burst out of the forest and onto the road where we'd parked the car. It was still there, untouched, a beacon of normalcy in a world gone mad. Get in, I yelled, yanking open the driver's door. Thank God Mr. Larson had left the keys in the ignition. We piled in, and I turned the key. For one heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life, and I floored it, sending us hurtling down the road and away from the nightmare behind us. It wasn't until we'd put miles between us and those awful woods that we finally let ourselves breathe. Let ourselves think about what had happened. Charlie, Peter said quietly, you saved us. How? I shook my head, still not entirely sure myself. I don't know. I couldn't let it win. I couldn't let it take us. But Mr. Larson, Jason said, his voice breaking, and Eric, they're still. We'll come back, I said firmly. We'll get help, real help, and we'll find a way to save them. I didn't know if it was possible. I didn't know if anything would ever be the same again. But I did know one thing. We had faced the impossible, stared into the abyss of an alien horror, and we had survived. We had held on to our humanity. As the first rays of sunlight began to paint the sky, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, whatever battles we might face, we would face them together. And we would never, ever give up. Because that's what it means to be human. To fight, to hope, to survive. And as I drove us towards home, towards safety, I made a silent promise. To Mr. Larson, to Eric, to everyone who had been taken by that thing in the woods. We would find a way to save them. We would find a way to stop this, even if that meant that it cost me my own well-being. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.